All right, got a big one this weekend. Georgia taking on Oregon 0 week. You got Dan Lanning taking on his, actually week 1, I should say, taking on his old team here. We're going to break it all down with an insider, Jordan Hill of Dawgs 247, joining the program. Jordan, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, absolutely. A big week of college football. And like you said, ready for Saturday. A very interesting game in Mercedes Benz there in Atlanta.
So I think this is an easy question to start off with, but I'll start it off here. Was Clemson last year a tougher test starting off the season, or Oregon this year, considering the way Clemson's season went on?
I think so, but there are definitely challenges with this game. And it's something I asked Kirby Smart about yesterday. There's a lot of unknowns with this Oregon team. A whole new coaching staff, like you said, Dan Lanning coming from Georgia and taking over there in Oregon. And the fact that Oregon brought in 11 transfers from last year, really taking advantage of the transfer portal. Stetson Bennett talked about it last night when we had a chance to talk to him. He said, when you're preparing for one team, you kind of have to watch 4 different teams just to get tape on different guys, players who were at different schools last year. So I still think Clemson was probably a bigger challenge just because of the talent, especially at the defensive line Clemson had and the challenge Georgia had against them. But it's a very unique challenge in facing this Oregon team. And, I think there's a lot of things, even, looking like Bo Nix, the quarterback that was at Auburn, a lot of unknowns as far as what exactly this is going to look like from Oregon.
Right. And my favorite thing about college football is I feel like every coach is connected in some way. Like you said earlier, Dan Lanning was at Georgia for the last 3 years, but he also coached 2015 at Alabama while Kirby Smart was there. So another branch of the Saban tree. But can you tell me what did Dan Lanning mean to that Georgia coaching staff?
I think he was huge, and I think the way he worked with those other guys, Glenn Schumann, and the fact too, Kirby talked about it yesterday when he had a chance to meet with the media. He was very impressed going back to, like you mentioned, when Dan was at Alabama. He got to see how he worked and how he went about his business. And, there were a lot of questions when Mel Tucker left the Georgia staff, when he took that Colorado job and left, what the defense was going to do, what they were going to be able if they were going to be able to replicate the success they had with Mel running the defense. And Dan stepped up. When he first was hired, he was at Memphis and wasn't a big name, wasn't a guy that, when he was hired, he didn't turn heads or really get a lot of noise, but he did such a good job. It was a seamless transition these last few years for Georgia. The defense has only gotten better and better. And then you come off of a 2021 year where they only gave up a little bit over 10 points per game. So he was huge. There are guys that are still on that staff, and Kirby Smart also plays a big role in running that defense. But, I think that was a significant loss in losing Dan Lanning. And then very interesting just to see that his very first game is going to come against these Bulldogs. And, he knows about some of these guys on defense. He probably knows a few weaknesses as far as some of those guys are concerned. And it just kind of adds another layer to what we know is going to be a very interesting game for Georgia, first game since that national championship.
Jordan, I'm guilty of this, but how about the most scrutinized quarterback in college football, Stetson Bennett, who played his best football at the end of last season, yet here he is this year. How big does he have to be for this Georgia team to be able to repeat, considering the defense will certainly look different?
I think it's crucial, especially early in the year, because they're going to be breaking in pretty much 8 new starters on defense. But he benefits from something that I think people lose sight of. He's had first team reps all year. This is a guy that during fall camp last season, there was a time when he was taking third team reps. And, as it kind of went through, and JT Daniels, at one point, JT Daniels, before the season had started, was the betting favorite to win the Heisman. There was so much hype around JT, and obviously he had gotten the bulk of the work and the reps with the first team. And then you kind of just had Stetson thrown in there because JT got hurt early in the year in that second game. Very different situation this year, given he's been taking all the first team reps. He's had a chance to really bolster those relationships with the receivers and the tight ends as well. I think he's trusted. We talked about this on a podcast we did this week. I expect him to up some of those statistics we saw from last year. More passing yards, maybe a few more passing touchdowns. He is really looked at as the guy. They trust him. I think he's going to have an opportunity to make plays, and he's working with a pass catching group. The receivers and the tight ends as well that are just extremely, extremely deep. I think he has a chance to really make a lot of plays, and he's got a lot of playmakers around him.
Right. And speaking of tight ends, we've got to talk about Brock Bowers. Now, as a freshman last year, he was named first team All-SEC. So can you kind of give us a rundown of what he really means to that offense now coming into just his second year?
Yeah, I mean, he's huge. And the thing that makes him so unique is he has the physicality to block and to make plays. But, I mean, he's got kind of deceptive speed, and the way that he fits into this offense, I'm very curious because, he made so many plays last year, and it was kind of out of necessity. Georgia had a lot of injuries at receiver. George Pickens obviously being a big one. People are seeing what he's doing with the Steelers now. They really needed somebody to step up, and Brock did that. This year, they've got a lot more playmakers, at least going into the season, and even at the position. Darnell Washington, Eric Gilbert has gotten a lot of praise as well. I don't know if he'll put up quite the numbers that he did last year, but I think Brock is set to have another very good season. And I think he'll be the leader of those tight ends. And I think it's a group that Georgia understands. I don't know if there is a deeper tight end room in the entire country. I think they're going to work to take advantage of that, maybe get some of those tight ends on the field at the same time, really create some mismatches, again, led by Bowers when it comes to facing some of these defenses.
Jordan, I know coaches don't like to look ahead, but we're media, so we can look ahead. When is Georgia's, I guess, most difficult game past Oregon? When's that first game where we're going to be like, after this Oregon game, all right, now we're being tested?
There's a few points in the schedule. I do look at the game against South Carolina. I think that might be September 17th. And it's sort of the situation where it's not only having to play in Columbia, but it's going to be at like noon. And so it's going to be about 90 degrees in Williams-Brice. It's going to be a very hot environment. Georgia is going to get a bit of an advantage in the fact they'll be playing South Carolina after the Gamecocks went to Fayetteville and played Arkansas. So that should be a really physical game. Really, other than that, the part of the schedule that really strikes me as being something to watch and something that could be a challenge is the very end. Playing Tennessee, playing at Mississippi State, playing at Kentucky to finish the conference part of the schedule. Those are going to be some really tough tests in early November into mid-November, and then you have to factor in how healthy Georgia is at that point in the season. The two games that I have circled that I think could be the most trouble Georgia has is at Mississippi State and at Kentucky. Closing out the year, playing again, especially Mississippi State. We know those Mike Leach offenses can give teams trouble, but I think it's a pretty manageable schedule on the whole for Georgia. The biggest part when you get to the end of the year, you just got to be healthy.
And we heard at SEC Media Days, Coach Smart said, quote, "We will not be hunted. The hunting will be from us." So do you think that's easier said than done? And do you think that Georgia has enough weapons in the arsenal to be able to do that?
I think they do, and I think part of that is sort of the mindset that Kirby Smart has had all along. I mean, he gets compared a lot of the time to Nick Saban, and I think it's two coaches with a very similar mindset. I mean, these guys are competitors. These guys are not satisfied, and that's something that, going back to the very first media availability we had back in the spring, Kirby talked about, look, the preparation didn't change. The fact we won the national championship, it didn't change. It was the same schedule. Started a little bit later in the year because they played January 10th. That's much farther into the season or into the calendar that Georgia's gone compared to past years. He said, but we had the same workout schedule. We had the same attack and approach to a new season. They understand this is a new team. They feel like a lot of the guys that accomplished quite a bit last year, they're in the NFL now. 15 guys drafted off that championship team. I do think they have the talent. I think that particularly on defense, maybe early on, we're going to see some growing pains, but I think the schedule sets up well for them to be the hunted. Everybody's looking at them. And I think really, to me, the biggest test is going to be if they are able to win the East. It's how they handle going to Atlanta and playing who I really feel like will be the Alabama Crimson Tide with another marquee matchup.
There he is. That is Jordan Hill, Dawgs 247. Jordan, we appreciate your time, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's do it again.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.